Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's segment right here on the Product and Packaging Powerhouse. I am your host, Megan Young Gamble, Chief Project Officer at Get Level Consulting, also referenced as GLC, host of this infamous podcast, and also a entrepreneur, business owner, and all the other things as well. And so today, guys, this is a special episode that I'm going to do. It's going to be short and sweet. But this is really a testament and some of the reflections of me having the podcast. So, if this is your first time here rocking with me, welcome to the house. Make sure you do follow us on all of your favorite streaming platforms. We do have a YouTube channel that does have the full episodes as well. So, make sure you do click the links that are down in the show notes to add us to all of your favorites, including YouTube. And then at the end of the episode, make sure you do go and give us some love as well with 5-star ratings, because that means a lot to me and all the efforts and my team behind the scenes that are really helping to put this podcast up and some of the efforts we do behind the scenes. So, for today, this is a special one because as I am kicking off my personal new year, coming into my 37th year of life, a lot more wisdom to gain as, God willing, I move forward with each and every day. I wanted to take a moment to really highlight the podcast because Product and Packaging Powerhouse officially launched on my birthday, August 14th, 2023. And year to date, we have launched to over 26 episodes, and we have spoken with industry powerhouses around the creation, development, and launch of products and packaging from various business sectors to talk about the good and the ugly truth around what it takes to create the products, create the packaging, what it takes for all the different business sectors as well. And really just think about this as really the behind the scenes team for you as consumers to be able to enjoy some of your favorite products that you see displayed in some of your favorite stores and also online. So there is a full team that is working diligently to help get these products and packaging aspects off the ground, created and launched for the brand. So when I say it is a full team, it is a full team. And so I've had the honor and privilege to speak with various powerhouses from their respective business sectors. And so for this episode, like I said, it's going to be short and sweet, but I really wanted to talk about my reflections of having the podcast. So, if you have not been following me on LinkedIn or the respective platforms, from here, August is my favorite month of the year. As I mentioned, I'm coming into my personal new year for my birthday. My wedding anniversary is also in August. So I'll be celebrating my 10th wedding anniversary with my boo thing, my husband, as of August 28th, 2024. And it's also the time that we launched the podcast, effective August 14th, 2023. So it's a whole lot of good things happening in the month of August. But respectfully for the podcast, I wanted to highlight some of like 8 reflections I've had since I've launched the podcast. This is very raw. My team does not know I was doing this. I really just was looking at some of my reflection notes over the past couple of months. And I do that every year coming into my birthday where I just look at what I've done, what I've accomplished, what needs to still be accomplished personally and professionally, and even for my business. And I was like, you know what? This is just a moment to just hop on raw, and just be honest and just share some of the reflections because I believe in authenticity. And if you've listened to our episodes, or if you're going to listen to our episodes, you will see with me being a host, I am not your typical host where everything is very pretty. I'm organized and I'm structured. Just because I'm a project manager by trade, and it's the foundation of my practice. But I say I'm very like untraditional host, so to speak. So meaning like I will come on with big hoops, faux nails, different outfits. I like to have fun. I show my personality. I hope you can hear the personality, through your microphones and through your headphones and everything as well. Like this is just who I am. I tell people, I love rap music. I love hip hop. I love tennis shoes. I love lip gloss. I probably have way too many lip glosses in my arsenal, but hey, that's my business, okay? And I work in the space, so that's my prerogative. Like Bobby Brown, that's my prerogative. But as part of that, this is who I am, So as part of that, I really just wanted to just be honest and just share 8 reflections of me having the podcast year to date, as we're getting into, this new season of the podcast. And it's Oh, I can almost tear up a little bit, but I ain't gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry, okay? I'm not gonna cry on this one. I may do so afterwards, like as tears of joy. But with that, let's go ahead and highlight some of my reflections of having this podcast. So, starting with number one, the biggest thing I realized, since I've had my podcast, this is a whole business. Okay. And so, hear me out. When you hear people say that they're going to launch a podcast, you be like, okay, some people be like, "Oh, that's cute. That's nice. Okay, you got your little podcast." And I don't believe in littling anybody's anything. Like Kelly Rowland said that on an Instagram post, because it takes a lot to one, get up the courage to come on the mic and say something and be honest and speak your truth, and especially when I'm working in a very niche field. I have 3 niches, which is respectfully for beauty, packaging, and project management. I'm really in the beauty and packaging space, you know, and also being a Black woman, with my own company, independent company at that, and learning to grow and scale. Like outside of building the business, building a podcast is really like building out a whole media company. And when I first started, I knew it was going to be some work, to be honest, like on how to book the speakers and stuff like that. And to be honest, that's the easy part. But it's a lot of the strategy after do the post production of each podcast. We do very light editing with my team. And I do that intentionally because I want it to be very raw, very authentic, very gritty, because that's really the nature of our jobs and our industries, to be honest, to not sugarcoat it. And I want it to be very raw. And so building out the podcast, I've realized is a whole media company that I'm building out simultaneously with my business. Now, there is some overlap, in reference of the efforts I'm doing respectfully for the media side of the company with the podcast and doing press releases and the strategy with posting and outreach and things of that sort to different publications. But it's also overarching to the business because it helps with, speaking engagements. I'm a speaker, through my respective company and also as an individual. And so it's really leveraging and showing that I have my own platform and I'm building out my own media company to highlight not only myself, but also other industry experts that have a lot of expertise and knowledge. So that was probably the biggest reflection I've taken year to date, with having the podcast. But it's something that has taught me a lot more aspects about media that I did not realize, from advertising efforts to the different types of media there is, to how outreach, the different ways to use the media and more. And so yeah, that's the biggest thing I can really say, as part of that. But leading on to my next point of the second reflection of having the podcast is it has really taken a whole community to build out this media company. And so, as I mentioned, I do have a team, behind the scenes team that diligently works with me, helps me with all of my crazy ideas and more, in reference of what we're doing, the strategy, um, things of that sort, so it really takes a community. So I want to shout out my team. My team has been instrumental in keeping this podcast afloat, even when, I feel like I'm not doing enough, I'm not ready, I'm not where I should be. All that imposter syndrome stuff, my team's like, "Miss Megan, we got this. Like, keep going. Like, let us do what we supposed to do." So I tell people, and I'm very transparent, you know, um, in reference of like editing the podcast is very light editing. But I have a team that helps me with, helping to download the links to help follow up with my podcast guests in between, my clients and things of that sort from my business standpoint, helping to get the content published, to helping to push the outreach of our press releases. Now, everything still has to be approved by me, but it really takes a community to build this out. And I just have to shout out my team. Y'all know who y'all are because it is so much that is happening behind the scenes that I did not realize, leading back to point number one of what it takes to create a whole media company simultaneously to the business and how they intersect as well. So it really takes, the team behind the scenes to really help with getting the podcast out. But also as part of the community, it really is my connections that have been so worthwhile that I've cultivated over the years since I went independent, and even some connections before then, that have been instrumental in their support and giving me, best tips and advice of launching the podcast. Like I'll tell you a quick story talking about community. So 3 years ago, it was three said individuals. I call them the triple threat, who really was like, Megan, you should launch a podcast. Adam Peake, Emilio Matos, and Corey Connors. And they're well known in the packaging space and everything. And when they told me that 3 years ago, I was like, oh yeah, I could, but I wasn't ready. But it came to a season where I was beyond ready because I saw where I was going with the business. I saw where I was at personally and professionally, where I was not there 3 years prior. But as of 2023, that's where it was like, okay, full steam ahead. I'm ready to do the podcast. And I reached out to them and asked for like, how do I get started? What tools did you utilize? Like I'm asking them all the questions because now they're vets, right? Infamously known all across the world and everything. And now for me to be in this space is like full circle. And that's what I mean by it takes community. Like I don't know everything. I knew a few people that were doing podcasts. So, I would reach out to each of those, but it really takes a community to really help you soar in your respective efforts. And then the third part of the community that I'll quickly say is with the conversation, excuse me, with the connections that I've cultivated over the years, some virtual, some in person because I launched my business during COVID. So with me going independent, I did not have the opportunity to really be out in the streets and network, shaking hands, kissing babies, all that stuff. So a lot of my engagements was through a virtual meeting platform, Zoom, Teams, whatever. And so as part of that, a lot of my connections have been cultivated virtually. And so a lot of the guests that I've had the honor to have on the podcast I've met through virtual platforms like LinkedIn. Some I've met in person. Some were referred to me, from mutual connections. That's the community, and so I'm so grateful for my community, from my team to those who believed in me and gave me some tips and resources for starting the podcast, to even my connections and some that have been featured on the podcast. Like I shout y'all out because y'all are the true powerhouses behind this Product and Packaging Powerhouse podcast, as well. And of course, I have my husband, my mom. Like, guys, when I say my mom, she'll send me something almost like every morning. She's like, there you go, there you go. Um, it's almost like the beginning of the song, with Master P. There they go, there they go. But she sends that to me and she's like, there you go, showing up on my LinkedIn timeline. And it's just so cute because I'd be like, Mom, am I your only friend? She's like, No, you're not my only connection on LinkedIn. Okay. She tells me that fiercely. But as part of that, I think it's so cute that like my mom sends me those images like every day. Because she's like, There you go. How do you do this? I thought you were asleep. And I was like, Girl, don't worry about that. But with that, I have my family and friends help support me as part of the community as well because my husband's heard some stories, and I'm like, "Babe, I don't know about this." And he like, just keep going. You got it. Keep going, keep going. And then seeing my mom's messages is always like so cute, of like different posts and stuff she sees me on LinkedIn with. She's like, how do you do all this? So, guys, it's a real community. And that's probably the second reflection I would say of having the podcast is it really takes a community at the end of the day. And so the third reflection I would say for me having the podcast that circles back to point number two of the community with the connections that I've cultivated and those who have had the opportunity to be on the podcast, and for me to ask these conversations, it's been very intentional. And that's one thing that I can really appreciate with my network and my community is we all are very intentional of how we move, how we operate, how we support each other. And that leads to the intentional conversations that we've had on the podcast. And so it's amazing, and I really can tear up because it's just like, I never thought that I would be where I am now, and so this is just like a profound moment. I told you I wasn't gonna cry, but, it's really profound, that I've had people in my network, in my community, to support me and to be part of the conversations, and to talk about something that's very industry specific. It's not pretty, it's not sunshine and rainbows, it's not the typical podcast where, it's talking about nonsense or crazy or whatever there it may be, but it's something that's relevant to our industry because really the intersection of me and the people I've had the intentional conversations with is we all share a love of our industry. We are the active, behind the scene, unsung heroes to get products and packaging, to respective destinations and get them launched and the different trials and tribulations and the headaches and the challenges and, the setbacks and all the things. Like we've all experienced it on our, in different accords and different realms, but that's part of the conversation, and that's part of being intentional to understand what's happening in our industry, in our states, in our, municipalities, what's happening in the US. It's a lot of stuff happening, but respectfully for the industry, like what this means. Um, how do we move? How do we make more informed decisions? How do we educate other people? How do we think about the future generation coming up behind us? There's so much to think about, but that's really the beauty of these intentional conversations that I've had on the podcast as well. And so my powerhouses. So for those of you who've been on the podcast, thank you. You're part of the community. You've been part of the intentional conversations. Um, and I just appreciate you all for supporting me in this endeavor as well. And so, as part of the reflections, I got to be honest, lean on to my fourth point. There's been some mistakes I've made along the way. And I think um, there's beauty in the mistakes that we make along the way. Because if we don't make the mistakes, we don't learn from them and we don't know how to become better and how to grow from them. And so when I did my first announcement of the podcast, even to now, being honest, made plenty of mistakes, but at the end of the day, I don't even want to call them mistakes. They're really teachings, because as a project manager, we look at, different tasks and different things we look at holistically across the project as lessons learned. What worked well, what didn't work well, what are we going to stop doing? What will we continue doing as part of our retrospectives? Um, if you want to know a good retrospective person or coach, Donna Sargent, she's my fellow Leo. Hey, Leo. She does a bomb retrospective. So if y'all need somebody to come do a retrospective, I can, but let me tell you, she is the GOAT of there. She's part of the community too. And there's countless other people too that I can highly recommend for conducting retrospectives as well. But that's part of it as a project manager. We're always doing retrospectives. And even in my own personal endeavors and building out this whole media company, simultaneously to the business, I've made plenty of mistakes, but I've been learning from them and learning how to grow from them and incorporate new things. So it's continuous improvement. I'm going through my own Kaizen approach with this whole new podcast. And it's been very enjoyable, to be frank. Some stressful moments, but one of my team members asked me, she was like, Miss Megan, do you ever stress about the podcast? I was like, there's certain things I stress about throughout the day, but the podcast is the most fun element of my days, to be honest, because when I'm in succession of meetings and looking at client deliverables and all those things and focusing on the business, this is the fun part because it takes me away from having to think about the strategy and allows me to be the connector that I am and to showcase my personality and to have the intentional conversations, like I mentioned in my third reflection, so it's part of it. So I would say, like, for me, being okay to make mistakes and being okay to learn from them along the way has been truly a blessing in itself. And so my fifth reflection, the podcast, because it's part of the mistakes, is and learning from them is to have some systems in place. So I shared quick story earlier about how I reached out to the triple threat, Corey Connors, Adam Peake, and Avilio Matos to ask them, like, what they did to get started, what tools that they started with. And they was like, look, I started with just hitting Zoom, record, and then put it out there. And that's what I did, and as I started thinking about like my own, like how I have systems in place for my business, I said, how can I implement systems for the podcast? And let me just say, it's not a very robust system, but it's an efficient system that works for me. And what I mean by that is like when I want to have, I realized early on I would get on a 1 hour exclusive with a conversation with somebody. And, we had some dialogue through email, but it would have been helpful to have like a 15-minute introductory session, introduce who I am, the podcast, narrow down on the topic, and then allow them to book or I book their session during that meet and greet time, but those are things I learned. And so even having just like a calendar system, I use Calendly for all of my bookings respectfully in my business, GLC. And so I was like, let me leverage this for, meet and greet. So those who would be interested or being prospective guests that I do outreach to, let me send them a 15-minute meet and greet session. And then there's workflows embedded on the back end where after the meet and greet, they have the opportunity to book their 1 hour exclusive. They can get a one pager about us, but this took time to get there. And I'm still refining the process, even within our email newsletters, how do we distribute them, excuse me, to even like the YouTube, like learning YouTube and all the keywords and stuff like that. um, That's a whole learning in itself, to be frank. But as part of that, like having systems in place and then also recognizing when it's time to elevate certain systems. So, like my first episode, I was recording just through a webcam. Now I have a microphone. This one was gifted to me, and then my husband gifted me one as well. So I have two of them. So now I'm looking at how to do you know, um, in person conversations and such. So those things are evolving over time. And how to have a virtual recording system. So, I'm migrating from Zoom to Riverside now. So, it's been a lot of things, but like having the systems in place, even like on the back end for my team, how we manage, our episodes and staying on track with checklists and, having everything contained in one board and having our back end for housing, our repository of different assets and stuff. So it's really thinking through the systems all the way around, not just at the time of recording, but really most beneficial aspect is on the back end when we're doing the post-production work. So post-production, like as soon as recording is done, how do we, modify it? How do we go through the closed captions, editing? How do we distribute it to the respective guests in case it has to get approved from marketing? How do we get it uploaded for mass distribution? Like it's a whole lot of systems on the back end, but it's taking time to get there. But systems is definitely important. And the biggest thing I would say, especially those who would be interested in starting their own podcast or content creation, is start with what you have now. Do not come out the gate with any and everything. You don't need it. All you need is a efficient camera, a good enough camera, somewhere to record it that has a clear mic and hit record. I started off with just a webcam and Zoom, to be honest. Now I have a microphone and interface. Now I have lights and stuff like that if I need additional lighting. Now I have a new recording platform and such that I'm going to be incorporating going forward. That came over time. So start with what you have now, evolve and grow as you get better. So that leads me to point number 6, reflection of the podcast, is be okay with the evolution. Because I've evolved over time. Just like I mentioned with my systems, I started with just a Zoom platform and a webcam. Now I have a mic. Now I have an interface. I have two mics and two interfaces, to be honest. And so with that, I've realized where it could be more efficient at with like the full process. So I've had to evolve over time. Even the process, like with my behind the scenes team, has had to evolve. How I curate the questions has evolved, even to how I think about the topics with the selected guests has evolved. So and I've evolved, to be honest, personally and professionally. And so be okay with the evolution. And there's something beautiful within evolution. And I think about really like a butterfly, because a butterfly starts off as a caterpillar, right? And then it goes into its cocoon and it goes through its metamorphosis to bloom into a beautiful butterfly. And so it's going to be, I've gone through my own stages where I've crawled and I'm going into my cocoon, and then I blossom into a butterfly and been able to fly and soar, in some regards. And it's been almost repetitive cycle with different stages I've gone through with having the podcast. So be okay to evolve over time. Um, and that's the beauty of us just being humans, like, and being people, focus on people first. You think about how to evolve over time, personally, amongst your family, professionally, how you evolve with your ideologies, your theories, your philosophies. Like that just makes us who we are as people, as humans. And that's the beauty of us being humans, to be honest. Um, Unlike any other species here, um, on God's creation. So be okay to evolve over time. So the last 2 points I'll mention um, is in reference to the reflection of the podcast is for number 7. One of the biggest things that I am very intentional about is be unapologetic. I say this and I say it's like Kevin Hart, say it with your chest, okay? Um, I say it with my chest that I'm unapologetic me. I am unapologetically me. You are going to see me. I have locked hair. It may have color, it may not. It may be in a different style every time you see me. You may see me come on with bright nail colors, like at this time. You may see me like my nails are blue, yellow, a little bit of black, couple designs. They're long, sometimes they're short. You may see me come on with bold hoops, statement pieces. You may see me come on with a t-shirt, some sweats, or a blazer. You may hear my flair. I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm a Southern girl to my core. I live in Atlanta. I've been a Southern girl my whole life. Okay. Born in Texas, raised in Little Rock, and paying taxes in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay. So as part of that, I am unapologetically me. I'm going to tell you, and you are going to see that I am a unapologetic Black woman. I am unapologetic in how I move. I am unapologetic about my connections and how, I feel about people. And also how I protect my community and minds, like we say, but as part of that, I'm unapologetically authentic. And that's why with this podcast, even though it's an industry specific podcast and it's really highlighting around products and packaging from various business sectors to talk about the good and the ugly truth, I am unapologetic about how I show up. That's why I was like, I'm not your traditional host. I come on, I may curse at times, At times it may be, I may question things. I may agree, I may disagree, with the guests and some of their thoughts and conversations. But I think that's what is the beauty of who I am, number one. Secondly, I'm a true Leo. Okay, that's second. But then third, like that's just who I am. I've always been this way. And so I am unapologetic about it. I don't waver. I don't conform to quote unquote standards. And that's just who I am. And that's what makes me me. And I'm unapologetic about it. And so I always tell people be unapologetic about yourself. And I'll share a quick story. I remember when I first got my PMP and I was going into a new role, a new company. I talk about this a little journey, a little bit on episode 2, Detour to Destination Journey, personal journey. Check it out. Um, but as part of that, at that time, when I went into my interview, um, when I went into my interview, I went in with a big fro. Like I had my loose, natural, curly fro. I wore it out, proud. I want you to see how my hair grows. I want you to see how I'm going to show up. And at that time, I had some older people say that that was not professional to do. Why would you go into an interview with your fro out? And I say, well, because one, this is how my hair grows, first off. Secondly, I need them to see how I show up to an interview is how I'm going to show up to work. Third, my hair should not be indicative of how I'm going to perform or not perform. My hair is a reflection of me. It is my personality. Some people express their personality through their hair, some express personality through, body art, some through jewelry, some through their clothing, some through shoes. Everybody is expressing their personality differently. And in some cases it may not even be, upon first impression. Their personality may be displayed in, how they draw, you know, things that they do. There, I know a lot of people who are flower, uh, plant moms and dads. So that's part of their personality. So, at the end of the day, we all have something that resonates with us, and we're unapologetic about those things. And so that's why I always say be unapologetic because if I did not go in with my fro and I went in with just straight hair, would that have been the perception every time I come in there? Now, don't get it twisted. I did go to corporate with all different type of hairstyles. From I think my first day, I came in with braids because sometimes for Black women it's braid season. Okay, and so as part of that, I went into work the first day with some braids. I think a month later, I had a wig. Then the month after that, I came back with a fro. So you see the evolution of hair, and that's why like the Crown Act is so important because at the end of the day, we should be able to rock our hair however we see fit as long as it is professional and it's tamed, right? So those things are important. So be unapologetic you. And that's why I was like, I am unapologetic about who I am, how I move, how I show up. Because at the end of the day, my work is showcasing how I operate and how I move. And like the strategy behind it, I'm very strategic about my plays. So it's like Denzel said on training day, it's chess, not checkers. So I really think about the chess moves ahead. So at the end of the day, I'm telling you all those stories to say, wrapping it up, be unapologetically you. Just like I'm unapologetically me. And so the last thing I'll share as eighth reflection of the podcast, after all these things I mentioned, some that are good, some that have been lessons learned, continuous improvement along the way, and evolving over time. At the end of the day, this podcast has been about having fun. From my community to my team to the connections to the conversations to being unapologetically me. I have the most fun being on the podcast, to be honest, because it takes, like I shared earlier, it allows me to take a break from the day to talk about these things on the podcast. And so this is something that has been truly enjoyable. I'm still learning and growing from this profession, in building out this whole media company, but it's truly been an experience and it's been so much fun. And so it up from here because I shared 8 reflections of me having the podcast. And I said it was going to be short and sweet, but this was a little bit longer than anticipated. But y'all see I'm unapologetically me, right? And I thought it would be just very raw and honest to really just give context of each of the reflection points. And so guys, as we're wrapping up for today, if you are listening to this, make sure you do check out the live podcast celebration that we are having on my birthday, August 14th. So those links will be down in the show notes. And if you're not able to join us live, you will be able to catch the replay as well. Secondly, make sure you do add us to all of your streaming platforms or your favorite network, including YouTube, so you can check out all of our prior episodes and make sure you give them a listen. And then lastly, once you do listen, please show some love and give us a 5-star rating down in your respective platform as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your ongoing support, for being part of the conversation, to really talk about the good and the ugly side of me having the podcast. And so thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure you do follow, like, and subscribe to our platforms. And I look forward to seeing you all in the upcoming episodes ahead.